Hi, welcome to this edition of Mysticism Disabilities. Today I have a very special guest, and it's just special today because today is her birthday, and she has decided to spend a few hours of her birthday talking to us and Mysticism Disabilities. Yesutor, thank you so much and happy birthday once again. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Farida.
So,
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
uh, so Yesutor is the head of interventions of AIDD network, and it is, I believe, it is an autism not it is an autism outreach program. And I like to find out from you how you got into autism, how you why autism, because especially in this part of the world where people are not interested in disabilities unless it affects them or somebody close to them. So welcome to the show, and let us know what your background is, why you got into disability interventions and advocacy, and especially why autism.
Okay. All right. So, um, basically, I think my life has been surrounded by issues of disability. But I don't think I paid much attention to it till very recently. When it comes to autism, I I would say it was like a calling. I was working in retail and I decided, look, I've always worked with children. I don't want to be in a regular classroom, but I want to work with children who have some form of disadvantage, something I can do and, know that I'm making impact. Because I said there are so many teachers. Everybody is a teacher, and I don't think that as a teacher I'll be able to fulfill that. So I met a friend, DeLawrence. I met him one day and he said, oh, he is, uh, what am I doing now? I said, oh, I've just resigned from my job. I want to work with children, but maybe children with maybe autism. I think the word just came out of my mouth. And he said, oh, then I've got the job for you. In fact, I didn't even know what autism was. So, so he gave me my first client. Seriously, he gave me my first client, which was a client he was working with, but had to leave because of school. And so from there, I developed an interest. And then thank God, I think God just arranged everything. And Tina Nekria of Awawa too had also started a training program for persons interested in working with children with autism. And that was in October. So I had met DeLawrence in June and started working with the child in July, August. And then by October, there was a training program available that I joined. And that's what opened me up because now I saw people from Antisa Workplace Act. And I said, okay, why don't I volunteer some days at ACT so that I can have a broader perspective? And it's like, it was just, I would say one thing led to the other. I just fell in love with working with these children. And I was just so amazed at how much they knew, but how little, or how much they were able to do, but how little we thought of them. So I just felt, okay, this is me. The other side of it is that growing up, I've been I was that child who everybody would say, and then we are for. You are always sick. You are always on some special diet. You are always. So I think that probably also drew me closer to being compassionate about things about children. Because I myself, as a child, I went through a lot. And I'll say that it was a few teachers who really, felt that, oh, let's help this girl. And so then they would treat me nicely and not allow people to bully me. But I would say that really 20, I said that was 2010. That was my year of turning around and knowing my purpose. And and I don't turn back. I would never turn back on that period of my life. It's been the most pleasant, I'll say 10 years of my life so far. And So I ended up working at ACT, Anti-Sewers Place, Autism Awareness Care and Training Center, for about 5 years. I was there for about 5 years and then finally went back to school. I did go back to school while I was there. She's such a wonderful woman, giving us opportunities to grow ourselves. And but finally went back to school abroad and came back to do my research and realized, okay, I have the skills to do broader than just autism. So yes, autism is what plunged me into it, but going out there, doing my research, coming back and remembering now that I have family members with intellectual disability. So that's why I didn't mention it in the beginning. So I have two cousins and an aunt who have intellectual disability. And it was now I was connecting it because somehow in our home we never thought about them as persons with intellectual disability. We just had them with us. We did everything together. Yes, I know that they didn't go through regular school like us. They didn't even go to a special school. So I think that's why it didn't click to me that they had intellectual disability. And as we speak, they are working. One works in a shop, but one works as a gardener. So it was when I came back actually to do my research and I said, oh, this thing in my own home, I have this issue. So I have to, look broader than just autism. And so when I finally came back in 2017, 2018, I decided to set up Aiden. Training has been my passion. When I was at ACT, I was I was doing a lot of training, and I believe that we need more people in the field. And so Aiden, besides providing educational intervention, and what we do is we try to program the intervention. We look at the child today and we try to program what things does the child need to be able to say move to the next level. Is it school? Is it work? Is it being able to sit in church with the colleagues? We try to program all of those things and support parents to be able to meet those goals. And so besides that, I said, no, training is important. Parents have to be trained, practitioners have to be trained. And so Aiden does that as well, and then reaches out to the community just to sensitize the community and ensure that our persons with autism, intellectual developmental disorders, or differences, as we call it, can be included, can be given the opportunity to participate, and can contribute to their community. So that is what Aiden is. So the full name of Aiden is Autism and Intellectual Developmental Differences Interventions Network. So that is Aiden.
So so you just deal with intellectual disabilities, not physical disabilities.
Not physical disabilities.
Okay.
I don't have the capacity. Interestingly, when I was in the university, my undergraduate program, I was more or less a note taker for visually impaired learners. There were three in my group, and I volunteered to be a note taker for them. So I would record, because at that time it would take a whole semester for the braille notes to come, and they will come only at the end of, like, when it's a week to exam. And so I was recording the notes and the text, the books, the chapters, and the lessons in the books for them. So I even thought I would do visual impairment, but God had a different plan. So here I am. Yes.
What are some of the things that you think we get wrong about people with autism and other intellectual disabilities? I mean, I have a physical disability. I know a lot of misconceptions that people have about me and other people with physical disabilities, but I really do not know that much about. I mean, I have my own misconceptions about people with other disabilities that are not like what I have. a mistake that most people make is that they think that just because you have a disability, you should know everything about every single disability. And I keep telling them that no, that is wrong because I am I am as ignorant as about some disabilities as you who don't have a disability is because it's not something that I have really paid attention to. And that is why I started this forum so that at least people with various disabilities can come on and people like you can come on and talk about things and other disabilities that most people do not know about. So back to the question, what are some of the things that people get wrong about autism and about intellectual disabilities? About intellectual disabilities, I'm assuming you're talking about Down syndrome, and apart from Down syndrome, what are the other common intellectual disabilities that we have?
Well, so apart from Down syndrome, there are certain disabilities that will or that could come with intellectual disability. Um, so autism, of course, is one of them, and there are others. There's that various syndromes, Williams. There's so many, and all of those. It's again they are spectrums, so it's not like given. Even with Down syndrome, it's not given because there are like three types of Down syndrome, and one of them doesn't necessarily come with intellectual disability. So that's something that many people don't even realize. So they see a child with Down syndrome, and the first thing is, oh, this person has intellectual disability. So there's a small proportion of persons with Down syndrome who don't have an intellectual disability. And so the I think the basic misconception generally is that when you if you look different, your brain acts different. I think that's the first one. When they see anybody who looks different, they think your brain acts different. Um, then for autism specifically, I talk to some parents and I say, oh, I'm working with this child with autism who, I mean, is interested in biology. And before I see him, I have to, go back to biology notes and then read a whole thing about anatomy or something, or read about amphibians because today that's going to be the topic. And they're like, and he has autism, you know. And then I have to explain that, it has nothing to do with intellectual disability. Some people might have intellectual disability as part of it, but the fact that somebody has autism doesn't mean they have intellectual disability. The other side is also the fact that people think they cannot talk. Mm. Because we hear that they have deficits in communication. And I say communication is not just about talking. So many parents are in denial because when they read and they think of communication, all they think about is talking. So I get people who come, that this doctor says I should come to you. They said my child has autism, but I don't think so, and I take a second look at the child and I'm like, well, these are the reasons why we are saying your child might have autism. And then I give them the stories of all the other children that I have worked with who are different, when it comes to their intellectual ability. So when it comes to intellectual disability, I another thing I say is I think everybody has some intellectual disability of some sort. Because when we talk about intellectual, it is not just you being able to calculate and do math. Some of us we cannot memorize numbers. No matter how hard I try, it can take me 1 year to memorize one person's phone number. My father's number, I still don't have it in my head. Like, and he's always shocked. His car number, I don't know the car number in the house. I've been with those cars since I was probably like a teenager or in my early 20s. I've been sitting in those cars. I don't know the car number. So everybody has some, but if it comes to writing poetry, articulating my thoughts on paper, I believe that I'm gifted, to a large extent. And so everybody has some, I keep mixing up left and right, and the Uber drivers get angry with me. So I tell them, please turn off the music. Otherwise, I can't tell you whether to turn left or right. I know mine. Maybe somebody doesn't know theirs. So they think they don't have an intellectual disability of some sort. But I think that everybody has something that
I, I,
kind of doesn't,
I totally agree with that because I always say that
yeah,
we all have disabilities. At least I know mine. But just because you
yes,
don't know yours, it doesn't mean you are perfect. And I don't
exactly,
and as long as you are not perfect, that means there's something you have a deficit in you. And the most
exactly,
important thing that you can do is to try and discover what it is and try and turn it into a strength. And that is what everybody
exactly,
should do. And and I like what you are saying because I mean, when it comes to intellectual disabilities, just because one, I always say that look, I have cerebral palsy, which is actually a brain damage which affects the motor development of the
yes,
person who has that condition. Luckily for me, the part that affects the intelligence was not affected, but but uh,
mhm,
but it's still the same brain. So just because if one part is affected, it doesn't mean the other parts are affected. So the most important
exactly,
thing that any parent or anybody who is trying to help somebody with such a condition is to try and work with the part that was not affected so that it will be able to work
exactly.
at its utmost capacity.
Exactly, exactly. You've said it. And just yesterday, I went to one of the schools. Well, it's supposed to be a new school of one of the children I work with. And the day before, I had to talk to her a lot because she's been homeschooled for a year. She's changed schools 6 times, and she just didn't want to go into a school system anymore. And she's now 13. And after convincing her, even showing her, this 57-year-old woman who graduated, who wrote her BC last year, she was encouraged. And I said, no, let me go to the school myself so that nobody, the work we've done the night before, nobody messes us up. So I went to the school, and as I was preparing my mind, just in case people throw questions at her, how to respond, or help her to respond, something just popped in my head. I said, why do we think there is such a thing called normal? Today we are talking about the new normal. But there is normal is relative. As we say new normal, the people in UK, their new normal is a lockdown. We are here, at least we are moving around with COVID, and we are calling it the new normal. So there is no standard for normal. And so I've told myself this year that any teacher who comes to me to say, oh, you know that these children, they are not normal. I'm sorry, but I'm going to be telling you that you are also not normal. The reason is there is no standard for normal. It is what you have been exposed to that will let you know what your normal is. So if you are ignorant and your normal has to do with your ignorance, you cannot come and say that somebody is not normal. I've been told that, oh, you can work with these children because you've been with them for so many years. And I said, so why don't you also create that normal for yourself? By working with them, by being open to work with them, let it become your new normal. So for me, I mean, yesterday, that was the takeaway from working with, from going to that school and just seeing the way things went. I think the school did well. They gave the children, different question papers, different subjects randomly. But interestingly, the child I work with, she loves math, and it was a math paper given to her. So there was no anxiety. There was no I need to go and pee 10 times. She just sailed through and came out smiling, and I was very happy because I said that's a big step for her, you know. And if she had been given English and I knew others were given other subjects, I probably would have gone on and gone to say, can you give her a math paper to do if you want to assess, whether she can join the school or not. And so it's very interesting the way we've we think that normal is a particular standard, and for which reason many of our children are even getting excluded. And I think that with more exposure, especially when it comes to our teachers, our health professionals, even social workers, it will help us to be able to understand, you know. Then right from diagnosis, the parent will not, the doctor will not tell you that your child is not normal, you know. Those are the key. I think that those things really shape the way we work with the children, the way we perceive them, and the kind of opportunities we give to them. And yeah, so I would
I like what you said about redefining normalcy. Because I always say that I feel that the environment that we find ourselves in, and the societies that we are in disables us more than our actual disabilities. Yes, because
exactly.
because because it has been built for certain standard, but for a certain standard which has been defined as normal. But but
Hmm.
but one thing that I tell you that normal is subjective. It's a matter of majority
Very
versus minority. If we were the
exactly,
majority, you guys would be the abnormal ones, and
exactly.
and the world would have been built for our by our standards, and you guys would have been struggling to fit in. And I always
True.
use the example of of an adapted living living environment as an example,
Exactly.
because I lived in a flat in the UK when I was in university, which was which was adapted for those of us with physical disability. So everything was at wheelchair level. And back then I walk and I use a motorized wheelchair during my period there.
Yeah.
And I realized that when I was walking around the apartment, it was a bit difficult because I had to bend to, to put off
Mm,
light switches. I had to bend because I had to bend to use the stove because everything was at teaching level. So I realized that okay,
mhm,
so when so just like in another environment where everything is built for the so-called normal class of people, those in wheelchairs will struggle.
mhm.
This was the other way around. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. That's so true. Yeah.
So 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 what do you think we can do? Policymakers and the government can do to help with these causes, because there's only so much individuals like you and I can do when it comes to advocacy and training. There has to be a lot done to implement some of these things at policies, so that it doesn't become the exception but becomes the norm. So what do you think the government and and not just in Ghana but across Africa, because it's like we all have this common thread of misconceptions about disabilities, and as well as that spirituality aspect of it, that we feel that children with disabilities or people with disabilities belong to river gods and all those things. Up to now I still don't understand how that thing came about. I mean, have you seen a river god with a disability before or something? I really don't understand the origins of that misconception. But
That's that's so true. And I think I I always say that people always want to mystify what they don't know. People always want to mystify what they don't know. So anything that is different, anything that is unknown, to a person, they try to put the mystic around it and explain it with mysticism. And so, and so, that story, of course, it's just like there was a story of night whistlers or something I watched on the BBC, and they test out the thing is false, and they've lived with this thing, and it's just somebody that acts in a particular way just to create that fear in that community. And so I think that generally, all right. So I think that generally, as a people, and I when I say as a people, I'm not trying to lump Africans in one, because I've met a few other Africans and I've seen that even while the challenges are similar, there are certain peculiarities to the challenges that we face. And so, as a people, when it comes to the issues of the supernatural, I would say it is not, we have a choice. There are the positive stories and there are the negative stories. So, like I said, I did my research looking at disability and sexuality. And
Really?
it was amazing to realize that in the Ghana, yes,
That would
in
be
the
very
Ghana culture,
that would be very interesting. So please
very interesting.
tell us a bit about that.
Okay, let me finish this. But in the Ghana culture, you know that they see children with Down syndrome as gods, and they say that you have to treat them kindly. And so I went into a chief's palace. I think it was in La, when I went to do my interview in La, and there was a person with Down syndrome in the palace. Now, when it comes to the Akan setting, among the Ashantis, they do not give permission for such people to enter the chief's palace. So it told me that, look, we get to choose what we want to believe. And so, just like some people say, look, our children are the children of the heavens, and you have to treat them well. There are other pastors who are there saying that, or your bosomba, so take the person away. And so we make a choice. And I think the choice that we make must be built on the basis of the fact that if it were me, how would I want to be treated? Because we forget that it could have been us. If it were me, how would I want to be received? I know somebody will say Tofiakwa, but it can happen. And that's one of the ways I challenged a headmistress. I said, Madam, you are probably in your 50s. If you have a grandchild today and that grandchild has autism, you will accept children with autism in this school. And she looked at me. She said, Hey, you are daring. Oh. And I said, Yes, I have to let you know. Don't remove this child from the school because of that. So the policies are there. But when it comes to practice, it is about attitude. It is about our own biases. And like I said, it's about exposure. So I think one of the saddest things we've done to ourselves is not have cultural studies as a subject in our primary schools. Because I think we would have been able to fuse the issue of disability and how it's culturally, how the cultural undertones around it. We would have been able to address that in our core curriculum, for the children. I think it's something that they need from the onset. Once we can show them that, look, this thing is normal. Yes, in Ashanti, these people think this. In the Ghana, these people think this. And we give them that opportunity to see the various perspectives. They will realize that it's just about perspective. And perspective can change. And so I think that right from primary school, we have done ourselves a great disservice. Many of us don't know so much about our culture, and we are not willing to learn, or our cultures, and we are not willing to learn. what we know, what we hear, the dominant ones we know, the dominant practices we hear have overshadowed the way we think and the way we live our lives. And I think it goes for all of us as African people. The dominant cultures and dominant practices tend to define the way we deal with certain situations. And so that is it. Now going to my coming to my research. Um, so I initially set out looking at sexual citizenship, which is how can or is do we see or how do we see persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities in this country? Do we see them as having a right to sexual partners, having a right to sexual autonomy, having a right to have their families? Those were the main things I looked at. But then as I did my research, I realized, okay, to start with, they are not even getting sex education. So in the end, my topic became more sexuality education for learners with autism and intellectual developmental disabilities, perspectives of parents and teachers. So even though I had talked to chiefs, I had talked to queen mothers, I talked to pastors, I focused my thesis just on the perspectives of parents and teachers. And I was very impressed about one thing. In the rural areas, up north, in the villages in Cape Coast, where some of these families or these children were, their families were willing to find them partners, have them married off, male or female. Even in the Volta region, they had those plans for their children. But I came to Accra and Kumasi, our urban centers, and the parents are like, hey, no, 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 at all. He can't even take care of himself. How much more? But in the hinterlands, in the rural areas, they were giving the children what I would call home sense, so that they can take care of a home, they can support somebody, and somebody else can support them. I was also impressed with the Islamic aspect, where I was told that it's in one of their, I don't know whether it's the Sunnah or the other one, is it Hadith and Sunnah, the sayings of Muhammad, if I quite remember, where he said they should marry them so that they will have someone to care for them. And I was like, wow, splendid. So when it comes to building social support in our communities where we don't have these um, formalized structures, I don't see why our law at that time when I was doing my research had anyone who sleeps with, and the way they put it, a female idiot will be prosecuted. And I was like, how do you even have that in our laws? How do you even have that in our laws? Now, what happens to a female who sleeps with a male who has intellectual or developmental? Will that person also go to prison? I just couldn't fathom the way our laws has even put these things. And why female idiot? Why do you use that word? Somebody said, oh, even those legal terms must change. So there is so much that has to be done. And I think that again, like I said, it's a matter of perception. For that parent who told me she has a 25-year-old daughter, she was grooming in Cape Coast. She was grooming her, and she said she wants to even go to the radio stations to ask whether there'll be some, like, to propose. You know how we do blind dates and all of that. They say, I have a daughter. I want somebody who will marry her. And she gave her reasons, just like the others. She said if they get married and they have their own children, those children will take care of them. Those children will not abandon them. But me as a parent, I'm going to die and leave my child. So what social support exists? I think that is legitimate. And I said I say that for me, so long as it has the interest of that person at heart, it is ethical.
I like I, I
And
like I like what you are saying, because I mean I've heard stories about nurses and midwives insulting and being very very abusive to pregnant women who have disabilities, it's as if they have no rights to have sex and have children. And
Exactly.
I always say that, look, just because a part of our person is damaged, it doesn't mean that we don't have the same urges as everybody else. I mean, we don't like to
Exactly.
get married and have children and all those things. And it's about time people realize that. I mean, you can't just I mean throw us out of that part of life just because we don't
Exactly.
we don't behave by what you say classify as normal. I mean, as you rightly said, we have to
Exactly.
redefine what normalcy is, and it's very
Exactly.
and I'd really like to investigate why the guys treat treat those with with Down syndrome with such high regard. I'm sure that there's a historical context to it that we probably do not know. Just like there's probably another historical context to why they are not allowed into the chief palace in Ashanti and I
Yeah.
find this thing. And once we understand
Exactly.
and when we understand what those historical contexts are, then it makes it's easier to break those myths around those things because most
Exactly.
most of our
Exactly.
most of our myths and most of our beliefs are based on incidents that happened in the past. Some of them
Yeah.
are isolated incidents. Maybe one day somebody with an intellectual disability knocked somebody in the chief palace in the Atlantic Kingdom or something. So since then, that is
That's
what
true.
I mean. We don't know. We really don't know.
Yeah.
But that is how some of these things. I mean, become beliefs and become practices and all those things. And what you said about the law,
Yeah.
I think what they were trying to do was to protect the women, those with intellectual disabilities. So that is why they termed it that way. Because let's face it, there's a lot of sexual assault in those which is not being reported and all. And you see
Yeah.
people who have gone quote unquote mad, as we call them, walking the street, some of them pregnant, and you're like, who did this to this person? I mean, how could you
This,
be so
I
wicked?
know.
Yeah, and all those things.
Yeah.
So some of those things were done to protect females from some of those things. But let's not forget that
Exactly.
the males are also sexually abused. Men, boys,
Exactly. Exactly.
little boys are as vulnerable as little girls. And there are lots of them
Exactly.
who have been sexually abused by their by the female caregiver or the house help or something, and you find out
Yes.
later that it affected them growing up.
Yes. And you see, that's why I said, why not? When I talked about this, I said, why not the other way as well? That a female who sleeps with a male with intellectual disability. Because when I spoke to some of the teachers in the north, they talked about one boy who actually goes to one woman in the community, and she sleeps with him and gives him yogurt, and he gets pregnant. And they have tried to, pursue this thing, and it looks like the people don't even believe. They think the boy is just making it up. How can this woman do that? So you can imagine, for yogurt, he goes for yogurt, and she'd ask him to sleep with him. So it's very interesting the way, on the one hand, we look like we are protecting, the females, but we forget that the males are also going to that, like, they also go through their own set of challenges when it comes to abuse, and especially with males who have intellectual um, or some developmental challenge where they may not quite understand what is happening to them, you know, they just get taken advantage of and nobody can do anything about it, you know. So it's very, very important that we are looking at both genders, or I would say both sexes, um, when it comes to the issues of abuse. And we should be able to really understand that it is not a blanket um, prescription. Yes, we are trying to protect them, but there are some who do have a sense of autonomy. And what we must do is develop that, help them to develop that sense of autonomy rather than, pressing it down and saying, well, watering it down and saying, hey, you can't even finish writing your name. Why are you thinking about marrying? My one of my cousins, he is very, the male. He says he wants to get married. And we keep saying, well, if you find a woman and she agrees, let us know. The bottom line is the woman must agree because we can't go and catch somebody's daughter for you. And so we have kept our minds open. We've kept our minds open that should it want to happen, I would say maybe sometimes the other, when you talk about historical, as I read the reasons, especially for the West, why they were not allowing them to marry and have children, it was because some of these disorders have a genetic um, basis, and so there is the chance that you would reproduce after your own kind, and the challenge is who will care for this child. So I say that if anything at all, that explanation must be brought to the person. You must try and explain to some extent, and then, or as a family, because I know that the human rights people, some of them say, what do you mean by as a family? It's about the person. But where you feel that that person may not be able to understand, as a family, you can try and safeguard it. And it has to be legitimate and it has to be ethical. I say it's about the ethics of it. It's not about having a blanket solution to these things. Why are we doing it? Is that the best option? I think it's the same when a pregnant woman's life is in danger. Sometimes they would say it is ethical for us to take out the baby so that the woman can survive. So sometimes I know that there are such situations, and when you have such situations, sometimes you don't have a choice. But where you don't have such a situation, my dear, allow them, give them the tools, give them the sex education, give them the help them to be able to build their self autonomy, understand what self control is, understand when to say yes and no, consent or not to consent, understand what friendship is, understand what intimate relationships are. Because it's not, when I say sex education, I remember the parents going like, hey, are you coming to teach them how to have sex? you know but sex education goes beyond all of those things. It's not just about having sex. It's about being able to differentiate, my feelings and my feelings towards this person. Um, do I need to take any action to meet those feelings? Or are these feelings just normal? Are they a phase that will go? Those are things that the children or the learners or young adults with intellectual disability especially need to learn, so that they don't just act and then you come and now say, hey, they don't know how to act decently, and that's why we don't want to expose them. I think we should rather give them the right tools, and they'll be able to cope with some of these things. You teach the child how to wear his shoe, you teach the child how to take his bath. Hey, as for sexual feeling, feelings for somebody, it's that's a natural instinct, and we have to teach them how to appropriately respond. What are the socially appropriate ways to respond to those feelings? So that is that
Yes,
is
yes,
that is
yes,
my
Yesutor.
take on it.
Yesutor, it has been great talking to you. Thank you so much. for educating us today.
Thank
Is
you.
there anything you like to add before we end?
Yes, the one thing I would always want to add is that the family is the first therapist of any child. And this year we have decided to focus on parents a lot. Parents can do it, but they want to just shove all the responsibility onto the therapist, onto the special schools. We are not in normal times,
Hmm.
and parents have to be able to do their part. And I think that uh, as a parent gets capacity, they are better able to manage their children. They are better able to be advocates for their children, and their children will be happy, and they themselves will be happy and fulfilled. And so that's what I will end with. Dear parents, you are a therapist. You just have not discovered your capacity. So please discover your capacity, and you will be happy that you did. Thank you.
Before I sign off, let me share my screen so that we can you can see Yesutor's LinkedIn profile, so that anybody who wants to contact her can can um, can, can, can contact her on LinkedIn. I'm sure
Sure,
that there are lots of parents out there who would like to get in touch with you. And yeah,
definitely.
yeah, okay. All right.
All
So
right.
thank you so much once again, and enjoy the rest of your birthday. And and God bless
Thank you very
God God bless you for all you do, and may He give you strength to continue with helping parents, families, and children with autism and intellectual disabilities.
much. Amen. God bless you too.
Bye bye.